What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back with some more Gioacchino Rossini, and we're nearly to the end of the Symphonic Overture CD I've been going through from 1999, the Plovdiv Philharmonic Orchestra conducted by Ruslan Raichev, and we're up to the Siege of Corinth, which is based on a libretto or at least a source material related to the Greek War of Independence against the Ottomans. And this actually, from what I understand, features music, at least in the opera at large. I don't actually know if this is specifically about the overture here, but music in the opera, which first premiered in 1826, is based on some of the themes and musical motifs that Rossini had used in an 1820 opera called like Mametto II. So again, this is actually more of Rossini recycling. Shout out the Jupiter 2 mission, who mentioned that, back in the 19th century, audiences weren't always seeing, multiple operas by the same composer, or even if they had, it would be years later, and, it's not like they had CDs at home that they were listening to, so they may not have remembered certain themes that were being recycled. Nevertheless, my understanding is that the opera overall features some music, at least in parts, that was used in Mametto II, 6 years earlier. In any case, yes, this is from 1826. I don't know if I've ever heard anything from the opera beyond this overture. I don't think I have, but it is a longer one. I noticed this one's over 9 minutes long, so we'll get to it. This is from Gioacchino Rossini, his overture to the opera The Siege of Corinth, which I believe is the first opera he wrote in French. I think it's actually his first French opera. In any case, it is, as I said, performed by the Plovdiv Philharmonic Orchestra, conducted by Ruslan Raichev, and this is a recording from 1999. Long. That just rushed by. Is it really? It is. It's more than 9 minutes long. I didn't feel that long. I was really immersed in it. And I tried to wait to the end, but I have a lot to say. So first of all, it features that telltale, characteristic string composition that I think Rossini does, or did, so incredibly well. And in fact, there was a moment, I was thinking it was like, as we were moving into the second half, but it was actually the beginning of the finale, so maybe like 7.5 minutes in, but there was this flute riff that would go up a couple times, and then the strings would cascade back down, and that sequence, which we heard a couple times before it moved into a different configuration, or the next section, that moment in particular felt just like classic Rossini, as I've come to know and understand his overtures anyway. So yeah, I just love that moment in particular. Obviously, in the beginning section, we hear a lot of snare, like these marching drums. That definitely gives you a bit of the military feel of the piece, and those big cymbal crashes throughout the whole piece, but especially, again, in sort of the beginning and the middle section, and then culminating even more intensely as we get to the end. That sounds like battle. That sounds like, buildings being struck by cannon fire. But even at the same time, it doesn't feel like there's, death and ruination and destruction in a sort of painful, like sad way. The tone of the piece, it definitely conveys the peril. It definitely conveys the fiery intensity, but it feels like the cause is noble. It feels like the defenders are, doing their duty. It feels like there's a real importance to the battle, and thus, like, it feels noble as the piece plays out. And the spirit of the combatants, I think, comes through in that sense. So yes, it feels like the importance of the battle in this noble spirit is perhaps the overriding feeling or essence of the tune sonically. I do very much enjoy some of the string moments in particular. There's that section in which it's like a big, intense and bright flourish, and there's like this response in a more like subtle or stripped down or minimal reply, and so that plays out a couple times where again it goes big, there's a smaller reply, big, smaller reply. I enjoy that. And yeah, the tune has a lot of energy, certainly, which, again, if you write a piece that's about a siege and a larger, like, war of independence, it feels like that's going to be part of the feeling. But I, again, wonder how much, if any, of the overture here is taken from earlier material, from that earlier opera. Now, again, even if some of it is recycled, a lot of Rossini's string work and just composition more generally, it has this power, it has this energy, even as he does intersperse it with these sweet, especially string melodies. But yeah, this one feels like there's a lot of energy and power in it, even as I said, if it has a more celebratory or profound feel. It doesn't feel like everything's falling down around you. So yeah, a really, given the subject matter, a joyful composition, and perhaps more percussion, again, more cymbals, more drums, and more explosions than in some other overtures we've heard on the same compilation. So again, without having heard the larger opera, I don't know if any of the motifs or melodic runs we hear here in the melody are, number one, recycled from that earlier opera, or number two, found throughout the larger opera. But again, imagine hearing this and it's like, okay, now here's the actual opera that you're here to see. It's crazy to me, because these overtures, they have so much, what's the right word? I was going to say so much importance, but so much weight, so much gravity to them, that to then just have this be the opening, the appetizer for the larger meal, is a really surprising or incredible thing to me. So yeah, ultimately we have one more to go, and it's the one I've been waiting for perhaps more than any of the others, the Thieving Magpie, the overture to which I think has been used in a lot of different cultural artifacts since then. Again, I think I already mentioned there's an episode of the BBC Cumberbatch Freeman version of Sherlock which uses the Thieving Magpie overture very notably, and I think it showed up in a number of other places. But yeah, it has a lot of drama to it, which again, this one has drama, but like in a different way. So I've been looking forward to that one. We're going to hear it next time, and then again we'll be on to a number of different compositions. Again, I'm going to go through some Mozart, I'm going to go through some Smetana. So yeah, we've got a lot more to go, but I'm looking forward to the culminating piece of this overture compilation. Let me know what you think, and I will see you next time. Peace.